Are you tired? Not just physically tired, but soul-deep exhausted from trying to control everything, fix everything, resist everything you don't like about yourself? There's an ancient teaching that will change everything, but it requires you to do the one thing your ego fears most. Stop fighting. But here's what most people don't understand about surrender. It's not giving up. It's not becoming passive. It's not letting life happen to you. True surrender, the kind the Sufi masters spoke of, is the most powerful force in the universe. And it begins with a simple recognition. The war inside you was never yours to win. 800 years ago, a man named Ibn Arabi wrote something that would shake the foundations of spiritual understanding. The greatest jihad is the jihad against the self. But this jihad is not won through battle. It is won through surrender. Think about it. Right now, as you listen to these words, part of you is fighting something. Maybe you're fighting a thought that keeps returning. Maybe you're fighting an emotion you don't want to feel. Maybe you're fighting a circumstance you can't change. Maybe you're fighting the very person you are. But what if that fight is the problem? Ibn Arabi taught that we are like someone drowning who fights against the water. The more you struggle, the faster you sink. But if you relax, if you stop fighting, the water itself will carry you to the surface. The very thing you're fighting against becomes your salvation. But your ego doesn't want to hear this. Your ego loves the fight because the fight makes it feel real, makes it feel important. As long as you're fighting, your ego exists. As long as there's a war, there's a warrior. But the moment you stop fighting, something dies inside you. And that death is exactly what the mystics called fana, the dissolution of the false self. Sufi masters discovered something profound. You cannot defeat your ego by fighting it. You defeat it by starving it. And what feeds the ego more than anything? Resistance. Every time you say, "This shouldn't be happening," you feed it. Every time you fight against what is, you make it stronger. But when you stop fighting, something miraculous happens. The ego, deprived of its favorite food, begins to weaken. And as it weakens, something else emerges. Something that was always there, waiting beneath the noise of battle. Your true self. Your divine nature. The part of you that is already at peace. Al-Ghazali, a great Islamic scholar who abandoned everything to seek truth, wrote, "I tried for years to purify my soul through discipline and effort. But the harder I fought against my nafs, the stronger it became. Only when I surrendered completely did I discover that God had been doing the work all along." But surrender is terrifying to the mind, because surrender looks like death. And in a way, it is. When you stop fighting yourself, the person you thought you were begins to dissolve. All your strategies for control, all your methods of resistance, all your ways of protecting yourself, they start to fall away. And this falling away feels like dying. But here's the secret the masters knew. This death is not the end of you. It's the end of your suffering. Because the you that dies was never real anyway. It was just a collection of fears, resistances, and false identities that you mistook for yourself. Rumi put it beautifully. Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. And do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come? When you stop fighting the current of your life, you discover something shocking. The current was always taking you exactly where you needed to go. Every rejection was redirecting you toward your true path. Every failure was removing what didn't serve you. Every loss was making space for what belongs to you. But you couldn't see this while you were fighting. The mystics teach that there are two kinds of will in the universe, your will and God's will. And these two wills are constantly in conflict. You want things to happen faster. God has perfect timing. You want to control the outcome. God sees the bigger picture. You want to protect yourself from pain. God knows that sometimes pain is the doorway to your greatest joy. This is the fight that exhausts you, the constant struggle between your limited understanding and infinite wisdom. But what happens when you align your will with divine will? What happens when instead of fighting the current, you become the current? Ibn Arabi called this fana fila, absorption in God, not because you disappear, but because you stop pretending to be separate. You realize that the breath breathing you, the heart beating in your chest, the consciousness aware of these words, none of it belongs to the small self you thought you were. When you truly understand this, fighting becomes impossible. How can you fight against the very force that animates you? Abu Yazid al-Bistami experienced this so completely that he said, "I knocked at the door of my beloved. A voice asked, 'Who is there?' I answered, 'It is I.' The voice said, 'Go away.' I went away and spent years in prayer and fasting. I returned and knocked again. 'Who is there?' 'It is I. Go away.' Again I went away. Finally I returned and knocked. 'Who is there?' And I said, 'It is thou.' The voice said, 'Enter, for I am thou and thou art I.' This is what happens when you stop fighting. You discover that the one you were fighting against was actually the one you were fighting for. But let's be practical. How? Do you actually stop fighting? Because it sounds beautiful in theory. But when you're in the middle of anxiety, when you're facing a situation that terrifies you, when every instinct is screaming at you to resist, how do you surrender? The masters gave us specific techniques. First, recognize the fight. Most of the time, we're fighting unconsciously. We're in resistance mode without even realizing it. So the first step is awareness. I am fighting this. I am in resistance. Second, ask yourself, what am I trying to control that I cannot control? Usually, the answer is everything. We try to control other people's reactions, future outcomes, past mistakes, even our own thoughts and emotions. Third, find the place inside you that is not fighting. Even in the middle of the greatest struggle, there's a part of you that is completely at peace. The mystics called this the secret heart, the part of you that belongs entirely to God and is untouched by the ego's wars. When you locate this place, rest there. Don't try to change anything. Don't try to stop the fight. Just rest in the place that is already surrendered, and something amazing happens. From this place of non-resistance, you begin to see that life is not happening to you. Life is happening as you. Every experience, every challenge, every joy and every sorrow, it's all arising from the same source that your Ibn Arabi taught that we are like waves on an ocean. A wave can fight against the ocean, but it's futile because the wave is the ocean. When the wave realizes this, it stops fighting and starts dancing with the rhythm that was always its own. This doesn't mean you become passive. This doesn't mean you stop making choices or taking action. It means your actions come from a different place. Instead of coming from fear and resistance, they come from alignment and flow. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, exemplified this perfectly. In the most challenging moments, he would say, "Tawakkaltu ila Allah." I place my trust in Allah, not because he was giving up his responsibility, but because he understood that his effort combined with divine will was infinitely more powerful than his effort alone. When you stop fighting yourself, you don't lose your power. You gain access to a power far greater than your own. The great Sufi poet Hafez wrote, "I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. But this light can only be seen when you stop fighting against the darkness. Because here's what the mystics discovered. The parts of yourself you fight against are not your enemies. They are your teachers. Your anger is teaching you about boundaries. Your fear is teaching you about what matters to you. Your sadness is teaching you about love. When you stop fighting these emotions and start listening to them, they transform from enemies into allies. This is why the path of surrender is called the greater jihad. It's not a fight against external forces. It's the courage to stop fighting internal ones. And when this happens, when you finally lay down your weapons in the war against yourself, you discover something beautiful. There was never actually a war. There was only love disguised as conflict. There was only God disguised as struggle. There was only your own divine nature trying to emerge through the cracks of your resistance. The moment you stop fighting yourself is the moment you remember who you really are. Not the frightened, controlling, resistant person you thought you were, but the eternal, peaceful, surrendered soul you have always been. And in that remembrance, there is only gratitude. Because every fight, every struggle, every moment of resistance was actually love preparing you for this moment of surrender. Welcome home.